For RCR Tech, I'm Sean Kinney. Welcome to Signal and Noise, where we host conversations from the edge of AI with a wide range of industry experts and thought leaders. It's a pleasure to introduce Mr. Geoff Hollingworth, Chief Marketing Officer for Rakuten Symphony. Geoff, welcome.
Great to speak to you again, Sean. I always appreciate our conversations.
So I'm going to start by time stamping our recording. If you're on LinkedIn, your feed this week has been filled with discussion of this MIT Media Labs Project Nanda report on the state of AI in business 2025. And I mean, there's a lot to unpack here. I think the headline is that the findings of the report are that despite 30 to 40 billion in enterprise investment in generative AI projects, 95% of them have failed and that they've got no measurable impact on P&L. I guess to start, Geoff, the background here is also rising discourse around whether we're in an AI bubble or not, perhaps a different conversation, but just what's your immediate reaction to these numbers? Does it sound directionally correct to you?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of failure going on for the wrong reasons. I think the better headline that should have been focused on is 5% of companies are nailing it. Why? Because 5%, the hidden message was those 5% they discovered were doing things completely differently and getting results that were significant.
Yeah, I do think that's right. I'm trying to write a column about this, and I was kind of going through my files trying to identify at least one company that's in that 5%. I came away with a few. Rakuten's one of them. Dell is another. And seems like business clarity matters, data matters, and that maybe, I think I said this to you in an email, 100% of ill-conceived pilots fail. So maybe 95% of these are just like people that are feeling pressure from the board, feeling pressure from the C-suite, and they just come up with experiments that don't align with their data, with their business objectives, with their workflows, or with anything else really. And we're seeing the results of that.
Yeah, I think business leaders need to be honest with ourselves. One thing I've noticed is how much are people actually reading these reports and these beyond the headline. I mean, I was laughing a bit. I was listening to the telecom.com podcast yesterday, and they had a big discussion about AI. And in passing, Ian Morris said, well, I haven't actually read the report, and then went on to speak about the conclusions on AI. And I think that feeds into the 95% or the 40% or whatever percentage of failure there is on these projects, that people aren't really understanding what it is and spending the time even to process the information they're being given and then decide if they agree or not.
I think that's maybe kind of a microcosm of what we're seeing with AI in general. People are just doing things. They're maybe not studying the details and they're, surprised when it doesn't work.
Yeah, it's a very strange behavior of, any endeavor has tools in it. I mean, it reminds me of the gold rush. 5% of people that went out to discover gold, found gold. And was it most interesting to study the 95% that failed and why? Or is it more interesting to study the 5% that found it? I would argue the winners are going to be the ones that either were in that 5% or are really studying why that 5% successful. And I thought the report did a really good job. I mean, there's a danger because I agree with the report. So there's always confirmation bias on this. So I think it's very important for everyone to read the report and honestly draw their own conclusions from it.
Yeah, you ran a poll on LinkedIn trying to ascertain exactly how many people read it, and it looked like about three-quarters of them did not, but I'm sure they have a hot take loaded up, ready to go for the water cooler or whatever. But I mean, here, I'll read a little bit from the report right here. Gen AI investment yielding outcomes so starkly divided across both buyers and builders that we call it the Gen AI divide. This divide does not seem to be driven by model quality or regulation, but seems to be determined by approach. So it's not a technology problem, it's a people problem, it's an organizational problem. They're not aligning their technology with the reality of their business and how it operates. How do you get over that? How did Rakuten get over that?
There's a lot in this report that is in the DNA of how Rakuten's approached this. So first off, really the goal of any business is business process optimization. So one of the powerful statements in the report, I thought, was that you're not buying a SaaS product that then people use. You're not buying software. You should view yourself as buying something that helps you with business process optimization. The moment you do that, what you realize is that just buying something doesn't solve anything. You have to actually implement it into your business of what you're doing. And obviously, the companies that do that well are ones that choose the really high value use cases to put the tool into that context first.
The last time you and I discussed this was at the DTW Ignite show. By this, I mean AI in general. And I think I titled that video, AI Isn't Magic, the Art of the Practical. There's this tendency to think that the next shiny thing is going to solve all of your problems, and it never does. We've seen it again and again. We're seeing it again currently. What I can't understand about this whole thing is the more I read this report, the more I talk to people about this report, the conclusions are kind of obvious. They're kind of like stuff you'd cover in the first semester of an MBA program. So, what's your perception? Why have first principle thinking been thrown out? What is it about AI that's caused people to just abandon everything they know about how business works?
I think that's a really good question. And my honest answer is I don't know, because it doesn't make any sense to me at all. If you live your personal life this way, where you're just randomly believing something is going to solve your problems without doing your own investments, due diligence, and making sure it actually works the way you think it should, then you won't do very well personally. I don't know, there's this whirlwind of hype and people looking for these unicorn answers where they don't have to really do hard work. If you get very just down to basics, you have to do the hard work to learn how to best apply the technology and the tools. And there's no point in doing that generically. Do it in a place that if you can transform that place in your business, it's night and day different. And I think the report does a really good job of getting quite specific on where they're seeing the successes. For example, we've seen this in Rakuten. The back office processes are so unwieldy in many companies. I mean, let's take a really pragmatic example in the telecom industry. If you build and roll out networks, the amount of paperwork you have to do to governments that hasn't changed in 50 years. It's not consistent. If you get it wrong, you have to put it back in 4 weeks later. It's absolutely atrocious traditionally. Now we have a technology that can actually fill those documents in automatically with proven data that you know is correct. So you start getting hit rates that you put a document in, because you can't get rid of it. The government is not going to remove that document. But suddenly you can start to optimize the reading of those documents, the writing of those documents. You immediately take so much cost structure out of the core of your business.
Maybe we can dig in a little more on telecom. And, for the 70+% of the folks watching that probably didn't read this report, the authors at MIT found that media and telecom, they didn't delineate which percentage is which, but this was an industry that was having success with generative AI. I think that's almost counterintuitive if you're kind of locked into a telecom bubble. You see how slowly things change if you're looking at it every day, I guess. So you don't really feel the impact of what may be happening with generative AI or predictive AI or agentic AI. And I think part of that ties to what you said about these back office processes. It's not super attention grabbing, but it's very fundamentally important, and it does save time, saves money, and yields better outcomes. What can we learn from that as an industry? Because it's one of those rare occasions where it's like, wait a minute, is telecom getting this right?
Yeah, sometimes I think we're quite hard in telecom. I imagine it's true everywhere, where everyone believes the grass has to be greener somewhere else. Personally, I think this is a massive opportunity for telecom, because the other message in the report is the foundation of success is how you manage the data that feeds into this tooling. Well, telecom is actually very data-centric, data-rich, something we were doing previously from the automation journey. It's rather than rules-based algorithms, it's data-based algorithms. So I think culturally, We understand that this is the way to do it. And now we have a tool that actually can accelerate us when we focus on the very pragmatic. And there are lots of examples in the industry where that is happening, I think.
Yeah, to your point about data, I think operators have for a long time been criticized for not making use of the data they have, whether that's internal data that's locked into silos or customer data that's under leveraged for personalization and for kind of value add digital services that come on top of connectivity. But I mean, one thing I wanted to get your opinion on, if you start with the thinking that telecom has a lot of valuable data, but it's locked into silos that are associated with whatever domain or subdomain, okay, that's not going to be fixed overnight. Everybody knows they need a horizontal data strategy to then add a horizontal AI layer, but that's not really the ground truth today. But this report was all about generative AI. What about agentic AI? This idea that, okay, my data is in this silo, but I have it. So why don't I curate it just a little bit, look for what is easily automated, and just start doing that? Put agents where they would logically go and then scale from there. I guess what I'm trying to understand is there an opportunity to turn a perceived weakness into a strength that is actionable?
I think there is. Let's take a paradigm where we introduce AI programs or AI agents. We view them exactly the same as introducing an intern or a new employee to do that job. You will never just throw in, even an experienced person is not just going to be thrown into an organization, be expected to solve problems that have existed for 20 years. So the first thing I think is almost the hardest for companies is to discover what are the highest value, lowest threshold use cases to go after that says, if I can instrument this, then immediately my project's going to run twice as fast. It's going to remove this bottleneck. It's going to, change this outcome. And then how do I instrument with the latest technology solutions into that space? And then maybe that is an agent that is automatically kind of taking care of moving data from one silo to another silo and creating the environment where you can see those solutions come up. So one of the earliest things that Rakuten did before I joined in Rakuten Mobile was they understood the hardest thing was to understand what to automate first, way before the AI discussion. And it was simply that if there were blockages or problems, it was put into a centralized automation team that said, well, if we fix this, how much is it worth? And how hard is it to fix? And the ones that were easiest to fix, that were worth the most, got prioritized and deployed into actual production as quickly as possible. So none of that has changed, you see. I think this AI, it's don't believe that AI is an answer. It's a tool.
And I think what I took away from this too is that it's not, today at least, a general tool. It's not good at solving everything. It's a specialized tool. So, I mean, that points us to narrow focus, right? To my comment about find tiny little things that can be automated and then just keep doing that. And you eventually set the flywheel spinning and it makes really meaningful change. How long have you been with Rakuten?
I think it's coming up to 3 years now.
3 years. And I imagine that approach to automation pre and post AI has remained exactly the same, right?
1,000% true. Yeah.
And it's grounded in what data do we have? What can we automate that we can measure and assign ROI to? And how does that align with our group level goals?
Let me give you another example of that. It's a really good point. There's a huge discussion of human in the loop. Well, we had human in the loop when we first started, where part of the fundamental process in the operations team was that if there was an outage, as part of the root cause analysis, there was a tick box in the system that says, can this be automated? If it could be automated, it was automatically sent into that central team, the center of excellence. When it got automated, it got deployed to detect those problems. It was just rules-based, not data-based, most of them. In the operations team, there was actually a dashboard that came up that says, this has happened. We believe we've seen this before. We believe this is the problem. Do you want to check it, or have you seen this enough times? If you check this box, then you can fall out of the loop because your confidence is up. So the operations team never lost control to a machine. It was for them to go, we've seen this sleeping cell so many times. Yeah, we feel confident now that we can give control over to the machine so that then we can accelerate the other things that are happening.
Yeah, I mean, this ties into a super important point too, I think, which is trust. Like no one's going to automate something if they don't trust the system that automates it, particularly if the accuracy of that system is reflected in that individual's KPIs. So, I mean, any observations about the culture and the workforce at Rakuten compared to older, more established, perhaps what you described as a legacy company that you think makes this possible? It's all about way of working, right?
Yeah, it's way of working. So it's a software culture for starters. Rakuten is a software company. It's very similar to AWS. It doesn't manage the network, it manages the software platform that manages the network. So everything is input as an improvement into that software platform when you see irregularities. And then you've decoupled the size of the network from the operations team, which is why you have such a small team. All of that is really about the structure of that organization, the people in there, and the culture, the ways of working, what you're looking at. I think the other hidden bit in AI where we've struggled, a bottleneck in telecom, has actually been in the ability to write software and programs. Well, AI is also one of the fastest areas of improvement is with AI code generation now. Now, again, you can't do that unsupervised and you have to have a discipline around it. But you no longer have to have like this massive like resourcing for most of the stuff in operations is simple scripting to automate tasks that are happening, 50 or 100 times a day.
Yeah, speaking of a software development culture and code generation, how's your personal vibe coding journey going?
I'm going to do a big shout out because I use something called Klein, which is an extension on VS Code. And it's an open source project that uses all the latest models, and you can choose which models. It's as good as the discipline you have in guiding it to design the system that you want to have designed. So I really enjoy it because I don't have enough time to really learn syntax at a detailed level anymore. I don't need to, syntax is not a problem. The semicolons, the different for loops. It's like having an intern, that will help me just write the detail code. But if I ever give it an instruction that is not disciplined in terms of system design, oh man, it goes, you have to be very careful. So it's not, I don't think it replaces software engineers. I think it's another level of abstraction to empower them. And I think the really good software engineers are going to really have their output amplified crazily.
Yeah, Klein, you sent me, I haven't used that tool yet. That's kind of on my to-do list is to give it a run through. But you sent me a tweet from the company and it outlined the three pervasive traps in coding agent development that they avoid. Number one, multi-agent orchestration. I read that to mean don't invent complexity where none need exist. Two was retrieval augmented generation. And then three was instruction overloading. Context is important, but if you're trying to do something simple, that word again, give it just exactly what it needs, nothing more, nothing less. You'll probably have a better outcome. I did want to get some feedback from you on the RAG piece of that. I always explain RAG to myself as the difference between asking a model what it thinks or asking it what does it know based on this proprietary data set that I've given you access to that reflects the understanding of our company and how we work and how we see the world. Why do you think in this case RAG could be a trap?
I think the point that I took from that was that the big message, let me start with this. The big message is that perhaps we're moving from a prompt engineering world to a context engineering world. And the important thing is to understand what you actually have in the context, which basically is what the large language model understands about what you are doing. In the early days, the context windows were really very small, and you had to optimize them very cleverly for the information you could share. And vector databases were used in that, and RAG processors. As the models have got bigger, then some of those techniques literally just aren't as successful as they were previously. They're just not needed. There's a word for this. Yeah, they're unnecessary code that you've added into the system. But there's still a discipline about what you should be surfacing and publishing inside that context. I think the Klein article, the one message that comes back almost to the MIT is unless you are actively involved in instrumenting your own systems, then you don't know. Something that might have been really necessary 6 months ago is no longer necessary, but nobody will tell you. You won't know. So I think we are going through a honeymoon period, by the way. We will go into a certain level of disillusionment. I saw who's the guy, the CEO of Anthropic, who said 6 months from now, 90% of code will be written by AI. Well, I think today is 6 months from now. And obviously 90% of code is not written by AI. We have a lot of generated code, but I'm not so sure we have a lot of production code.
So I guess let's explicitly tie this back to the MIT report. And, context. I think we both consider ourselves connoisseurs of context. So I'm going to pull my favorite line from the report here. Brittle workflows, lack of contextual learning, and misalignment with day-to-day operations. The core barrier to scaling is not infrastructure, regulation, or talent. Big takeaway for me, again, back to the things you'd learn in the first 3 months of any MBA program, is that change is hard and people resist it. Given that that lesson is as old as time, how do we change? We historically haven't done it. This paper kind of quantifies how we're not currently doing it. So, I mean, what's something instructive that we can put out into the world that would speak to the fact that technology is not in your way, you're in your way?
Yeah, let's round it out with where we started. Let's look at the 5% and what they're doing. So they're going in and they're not just giving a tool that says go play with it. They're going, what business process can we actually change where the outcomes are better, not only for the company, but for the people working in that space? Then what is required to implement that? The more narrow the focus of that, the bigger the successes people are seeing. And there was a sentence in there that I found incredibly interesting that said, people are struggling to trust this, to your point. So do it in some non-business critical space first, and then build the trust, and then move it into a mission critical space afterwards. And the net result of that is you move faster with very demonstrative outcomes. Because there's so many good things in this report. Personal productivity is going up, but company productivity is not, because the business processes aren't changing. It's to your point. There's a naive lack of discipline. We've lost that critical thinking in 95% of these projects, is the conclusion from this report.
Well, I hope it's useful to people that read it beyond just the headlines, because as you said, there's a lot in there, and it really is, I think, at the heart of the issue, and the issue is people and change management. But I appreciate you taking the time to reflect on the larger state of things and give us a little insight into how Rakuten has found success and been part of the 5%. So Geoff, thanks for coming on and helping me separate the signal and noise.
Thank you, Sean. Enjoyed it.